truth is the most convincing story that maps onto reality, and that's why the central narrative is falling apart.
Right now in the United States, people should not be walking around with masks.
We must see the central narrative for the fiction that it is. We are Americans.
While elections are sometimes messy, this was a secure election.
The founders began the fight for human liberty and self-governance, and it's up to us to finish the job.
I'll tell you what, we are in a truth emergency right now.
This is the end game.
It's Monday, August 12th, 2024, the 1,300th day of dystopia. I'm your moderator, Chris Paul. Let's be reasonable. A warm welcome and hello to all of you listening through a paid subscription at I'mYourModerator.substack.com. You can become a paid subscriber for as little as $50 a year or $5 a month. And in doing so, you will get the ad-free experience. You'll be able to participate in the conversation over on Substack, and you'll be invited to the interactive live stream every Wednesday afternoon. And if you can't, or you simply don't want to, continue listening to the podcast for free on Substack, a wide variety of podcast platforms, and of course, Rumble. All I ask is that you share it with your friends. You can find the links to the podcast, the writing, the social media, and the merch site by visiting linktree.com/I'mYourModerator. Anyone who understands the roller coaster we've been on these past few years knows we haven't reached the end yet, and there may still be hard times to come. And as we add $1 trillion to the national debt every 100 days, we could be headed for some shaky financial times. If you're like me, you're figuring out how to diversify and make sure some seeds are planted for whatever may come. And that's one of the many reasons I think Bitcoin is part of our future. But it's not only about money. Bitcoin looks to be a critical part of the next generation of technology, communications, energy, verification, and even national defense. I'd encourage everyone to do their research and do it now. And if you're convinced of the likelihood that Bitcoin is an essential part of our future, then you'll need an on-ramp. I recommend River. River empowers you to grow your portfolio without any unwanted surprises and eliminates third-party custodians, putting you in control of your assets. Open an account with no minimum purchase requirement. You can get your Bitcoin journey started with just $1. Visit partner.river.com/reasonable to create your River account today. That's partner.river.com/reasonable. Now, I know that many of you out there understand the need to diversify assets, or maybe you're looking to protect your retirement savings, but you're not quite there yet on Bitcoin. And you feel better about precious metals? I get that too. I think going in multiple directions is wise, and I do that myself. And when it comes to buying precious metals, you want to be working with a good company. And that's why I've partnered with Goldco. Goldco is a 6-time Inc. 5000 winner, 2022 Company of the Year, and they've helped people like you and me place over $2 billion in gold and silver. And I have gotten silver from Goldco. And right now they're offering my supporters up to $10,000 in bonus silver while supplies last. Don't pass this offer up. Go to reasonablegold.com now. This is your opportunity to protect you and your family from an out-of-control government before it's too late. So don't wait a second longer. Take action today. Click on the link in the podcast notes or go to reasonablegold.com now and get your free gold kit, your free IRA kit. You'll be glad you did. Okay, so we left off Friday talking about a report in NBC News by NBC News' misinformation and extremism correspondent Brandy Zadrozny about an Iranian effort to interfere in this 2024 election. They were waging an influence campaign, along with, of course, China and Russia. Now, I've said before that in this cycle, narratively speaking, Iran is the new Russia. People have caught on to how the regime uses Russia as a scapegoat and a foil. They're the people who are always doing everything bad. They understand that over all of our lifetimes, there's been a long-running anti-Russia propaganda campaign that has been so successful, most Americans are prepared to believe that Russia has done the bad thing, no matter what bad thing they're accused of doing. And we saw that reach its peak during Putin's very brutal invasion of Ukraine. You know, all those areas that used to be called Ukraine that are now just part of Russia because the people there wanted to be part of Russia. But Putin staged his very brutal invasion. And at that point, it was okay to say terrible things about Russians forever. It's not racist. It's not bigoted. It's just what we have to do. And also, they can't participate in the Olympics. And if Russians are, say, playing tennis or something, we'll just pretend that the player's not from a country at all. Russia was so bad, they were prepared to just speak Russia out of existence. Whenever someone would be assassinated in Russia, it was Russia's fault. Acts of international terrorism against their infrastructure were also their fault. We were shown a terrorism event in a Russian mall, and that too was their fault. And if somehow the regime is able to create an actual disaster at the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, as they've been angling to do for 2.5 years, that'll be Russia's fault too. If the U.S. funds Ukrainian Nazi battalions, if the CIA works to train and direct their activity, as the New York Times reported, well, I guess it's a necessary evil because Russia just is that bad. If we have to give all of our money to a comedic actor who shuts down churches, bans political parties, cancels elections, and just maintains his rule through the implementation of martial law because his country's at war, well, Putin didn't have to stage his very brutal invasion. And sure, the comedic actor is only fake president as the result of the overthrow of Ukraine in 2014 by people in the Obama administration who are now in the fake Biden administration. But if it comes down to them and Russia, well, build some more biolabs. Russia is responsible for everything. Russia colluded with Donald Trump in 2016 to win the presidency. Russia hacked the DNC and released Hillary Clinton's emails. Russia made those computer scientists fake the Alpha Bank hoax. And then in 2020, everybody knows that the Hunter Biden laptop had all the hallmarks of a Russian disinformation operation. In fact, Russia's always hacking everything. Does it still work? Nah, it doesn't seem like it really still works. And so they need to go a different route. The natural replacement would normally be China, but so many of the people making these claims are owned by China, so that's not going to work. And no one believes the North Korea thing. So you basically just have Iran. And Iran is an easy sell because they've been put forward as the arch enemies of the global regime's proxy state in Israel, which is entirely different than their proxy state in Ukraine or their proxy state in Taiwan. This, you see, is a religious war over the home of the three great world religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. In fact, that's why it was so important for the global regime to take over that land, because they couldn't allow the other religions to have it. We've been told for our whole lives that Iran wants to wipe Israel off the map, and we are supposed to take that to mean that they want to kill all Jews or Israelis or Jewish Israelis or something. Or is that just a dramatic way of saying that they don't believe in the legitimacy of the proxy state of Israel that was created 80 years ago? Because that would just be a matter of geopolitics and international law. And then the conversation would have a whole new meaning. Now, I'm not trying to say that Iran is our friend. I doubt that Iran is our friend, especially because they see us as having overthrown their country multiple times just because we have. I don't imagine they like us a whole lot. But then again, I don't imagine that all Iranians think the same thing. or that we've been informed accurately about what the country of Iran wants, what the people of Iran want, and what the actual issues really are between the United States and Iran, or Israel and Iran. And in the absence of that specific granular knowledge that would allow us to actually form our own opinions about the relationship with Iran, we just default to what the TV has told us over the course of these many decades when they have lied to us about absolutely everything else. And again, I'm not trying to shift your feelings about Iran. I don't care how you feel about Iran. If you hate Iran and Iranians, okay. I've never thought it was very smart to hate a bunch of strangers, but that's just me. If you want to love Iranians, go right ahead. I've met some Iranians before. They were all lovely people. But how we feel about Iranians or how we feel about Iran is not the point. The point is whether or not we are going to default to information received from false authorities disseminated to us so that we will participate in our own exploitation at some point in the future. And that moment has arrived. In last Monday's episode, we talked about how over the weekend, there was all sorts of saber rattling. We were about to go to war in Israel's defense because Iran was on the verge of attacking Israel. The fake Secretary of State Antony Blinken said it could happen within 24 to 48 hours last Sunday, and it didn't happen. And then we were told it was going to happen again this weekend. And yesterday we were actually told that rockets were fired from Lebanon by Hezbollah, aka Iran, at Israel. At the same time, we were being told about the potential nuclear disaster at Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. A kinetic international incident was going to be necessary. We needed a display of mass devastation, something that would really capture the attention of the people of the world and provide an opportunity for everyone to get back on the same page. Because otherwise, they're going to talk about Donald Trump in a live Twitter Spaces event with Elon Musk. And we'll come back around to all that in just a minute. But let's stick with Iran for just a second. So Friday, NBC News, Brandy Zadrozny, this was the headline. Iran is targeting the U.S. election with fake news sites and cyber operations, research says. And we discussed this in the context of a series of revelations from Georgia over the course of the week. Donald Trump had kicked the whole thing off by sparking a little controversy with some of the Georgia rhinos, particularly Governor Brian Kemp and Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger. And after the attention was on Trump and Georgia and election fraud, we had a week of Georgia Elections Board meetings exposing a variety of instances of election fraud, malfeasance, manipulation, as well as the total lack of transparency and verifiability. The week ended with the indictment of Smartmatic's co-founder, Roger Pinate, who, it is alleged, was paying out bribes to officials in the Philippines to get them to bring Smartmatic voting machines into their elections. And we will circle back around to voting machines in just a minute. But from the NBC article, Iran is stepping up its influence campaign aimed at the U.S., researchers at Microsoft said in a new report, adding to the ongoing efforts by Russia and China to sway American public opinion before the presidential election. Beyond the effort to sow controversy and divide Americans before the vote, researchers said another group linked to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps targeted a high-ranking official on a presidential campaign in June with a spear-phishing email from a compromised email account of a former senior advisor and attempted to access an account belonging to, quote, a former presidential candidate. The report did not name the people who had been targeted. Microsoft's report also noted continued activity by Russia, of course. The researchers reported an expectation that Iran, along with China and Russia, would intensify cyber attacks against candidates and institutions and increase efforts to divide Americans with propaganda and disinformation in the run-up to the election. So Microsoft did this report on cybersecurity issues related to election interference, and they noted that Iran had set up these fake news websites that would supply AI-generated content meant to shift political opinions one way or the other, that Brandy Zadrozny found did not actually have much of an effect at all. No one was reading any of their content in the first place. And so it was immediately reminiscent of, for instance, that Alpha Bank hoax, where a big story was created out of totally contrived communications between computers. Or like the report released last year by Media Matters, for which they're being sued by Elon Musk and X, formerly Twitter, where they manipulated Twitter's algorithm to make the system supply corporate advertising right next to what they called white supremacist content. They essentially rig the game knowingly and then report on the results as if it all happens naturally, and I'm suggesting that might be what's happening here as well, at least when it comes to these fake news websites, and perhaps in relation to this story as well. So on Saturday, Politico published this article. We received internal Trump documents from quote-unquote Robert. Then the campaign confirmed it was hacked. Former President Donald Trump's campaign said Saturday that some of its internal communications had been hacked. The acknowledgement came after Politico began receiving emails from an anonymous account with documents from inside Trump's operation. The campaign blamed foreign sources hostile to the United States, citing a Microsoft report on Friday that Iranian hackers, quote, sent a spear phishing email in June to a high-ranking official on a presidential campaign, end quote. Microsoft did not identify the campaign targeted by the email and declined to comment Saturday. Politico has not independently verified the identity of the hacker or their motivation, and a Trump campaign spokesperson, Stephen Chung, declined to say if they had further information substantiating the campaign's suggestion that it was targeted by Iran. These documents were obtained illegally from foreign sources hostile to the United States, intended to interfere with the 2024 election and sow chaos throughout our democratic process, Chung said. On Friday, a new report from Microsoft found that Iranian hackers broke into the account of a high-ranking official on the U.S. presidential campaign in June 2024, which coincides with the close timing of President Trump's selection of a vice presidential nominee. And I don't think that we need to spend a ton of time on this, but that's not true. First of all, Trump announced JD Vance as the quote-unquote running mate on July 15th. So that's like 3 weeks later. And second of all, there's no way that Donald Trump was still deciding who it was going to be at the end of June. He said months earlier that he knew exactly who it would be. And again, it's important to remember that this is a fake campaign for a fake election. The 2020 election remains unresolved. Donald Trump did not concede, and we are in the middle of a disclosure on that right now. So the obsession with the so-called 2024 campaign seems totally misdirected as far as I'm concerned. It's also important to note that Stephen Chung, speaking on behalf of Donald Trump's campaign, is clear that they are also referencing the Microsoft report as their authoritative source on where this quote-unquote hack came from. Back to Politico. Chung declined to say whether the campaign had been in contact with Microsoft or law enforcement about the breach, saying it would not discuss such conversations. On July 22nd, Politico began receiving emails from an anonymous account. Over the course of the past few weeks, the person, who used an AOL email account and identified themselves only as Robert, relayed what appeared to be internal communications from a senior Trump campaign official. A research dossier the campaign had apparently done on Trump's running mate, Ohio Senator JD Vance, which was dated February 23rd, was included in the documents. The documents are authentic, according to two people familiar with them and granted anonymity to describe internal communications. One of the people described the dossier as a preliminary version of Vance's vetting file. Oh, wow, I bet all the deep, dark secrets are in there. I bet we're going to hear about them. I bet something in that vetting file is going to explain why Uniparty Media has been referring to JD Vance nonstop as weird. Ooh, I cannot wait to get the gossip. The research dossier was a 271-page document based on publicly available information. Oh. About Vance's past records and statements, with some, such as his past criticisms of Trump, identified in the documents as potential vulnerabilities. The person also sent part of a research document about Florida Senator Marco Rubio, who was also a finalist for the vice presidential nomination. The person said they had a variety of documents, from Trump's legal and court documents to internal campaign discussions. Asked how they obtained the documents, the person responded, "I suggest you don't be curious about where I got them from. Any answer to this question will compromise me and also legally restricts you from publishing them." Oh, Robert sounds like a secret agent man. What would legally restrict Politico from publishing them? Oh, it's because it's hacked material? Is that what it is? And that might cause problems vis-a-vis the Hunter Biden laptop or maybe Julian Assange and WikiLeaks? Oh, what to do? They're in a bind. Are they going to publish the hacked Trump campaign materials? Are they going to use a dossier of publicly available information to bring down JD Vance the Weird? The scope of the information obtained by the hacker is unclear, but it represents a major security breach for Trump's campaign. Last month, reports emerged of the U.S. intelligence community receiving increasing evidence suggesting Iran was working on plots to kill Trump in retaliation for his decision to order the assassination of Iranian military officer Qasem Soleimani in 2020. There's no indication that the shooter who targeted Trump at a rally last month was connected to the plot. In his statement Saturday, Chung pointed to those reports, saying, "The Iranians know that President Trump will stop their reign of terror, just like he did in his first 4 years in the White House." Iranian government officials could not immediately be reached for comment. In 2016, top Democratic officials were hacked ahead of the presidential election, or their information was just handed over by Seth Rich. The breach resulted in the leak of embarrassing emails documenting the inner workings of the party and former Democrat presidential candidate Hillary Clinton's campaign. National security officials later blamed Russia for orchestrating the hacking effort. Many of those emails were later disseminated to WikiLeaks, a website that publishes leaked documents, and were published in the run-up to Election Day with an eye toward embarrassing Clinton's political operation. Well, that couldn't have happened if the emails weren't so awful. In 2017, the Justice Department launched an investigation into Russian interference in the election and what role Trump associates played in the hacking effort. Special counsel Robert Mueller ultimately concluded he lacked sufficient evidence to seek criminal charges against Trump or his campaign for allegedly conspiring with the Russians. However, he described a Trump campaign that encouraged the hack and was eager to capitalize on the materials. And he described significant efforts by Trump and some allies that hampered investigators' ability to obtain key communications and testimony that might have shed more light on the matter. And you have to love how they still run cover on that story for all of the child brains, all of the Trump deranged people out there who still cling to this idea that Donald Trump and Russia colluded for Donald Trump to win the 2016 presidential campaign. Mueller found no connection whatsoever, but they're trying to frame it as he just didn't find anything worth charging. But apparently it's a crime not to thoroughly disavow Russia for hacking his opponent, even though they didn't hack his opponent. So we are told that Microsoft has done a report that suggests Iran has been looking to interfere in our election through an online disinformation campaign and a series of cyber attacks, hacks, and leaks. The mainstream media has now reported on foreign interference in our American election against Donald Trump to help his opponents. And you can imagine this will eventually be part of the route through which the Iran nuclear deal is further exposed. But we essentially have all of these situations from prior election cycles reversed. The polarity has been reversed. How are things going to look and operate on the other side? Will they stick to their principles? No, of course they won't. And it will just continue to get worse for them. They can run these narratives any way they want. Once the playbook is known, once the trust in the media is lost, and once control over the means of information has been reversed, none of it sells because it doesn't make any sense. And because the people communicating all of these facts for us to know have proven to be lying again and again and again, intentionally to manipulate and exploit the American people. So this story was released Saturday afternoon, and Politico's Alex Eisenstadt posted this on X, formerly Twitter. News: Trump's campaign says it has been hacked. The acknowledgement came after Politico began receiving emails from an anonymous account with documents from inside Trump's operation, including a dossier on JD Vance. And shortly after, none other than Chris Krebs, the former director of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, quote tweeted Eisenstadt's post. And if you don't remember who Chris Krebs is, he's the guy whose voice you hear in the intro of this show saying the safest and most secure elections in American history. He wrote in response to the Politico article, "Buckle up. Confirmed hack and leak of Trump campaign sensitive documents. Initial response by campaign suggests foreign sources, coinciding with Microsoft's alert from this past week and the ODNI Gov alert of the week before." And so that's the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. Someone is running the 2016 playbook. Expect continued efforts to stoke fires in society and go after election systems. 95% votes on paper ballots is a strong resilience measure combined with audits, but chaos is the point. Also, for anyone who has actually looked into these things, paper ballots is not a solution in and of itself. You can vote on a machine, and then when that machine prints out the receipt of your vote with the QR code that supposedly contains your vote, but for which you have no guarantee whatsoever, that counts as a paper ballot. That is not a hand-marked, hand-counted paper ballot that is fully verifiable by the voter and anyone else who might look at it. And claiming that the paper ballot in that situation provides any form of protection whatsoever is intentionally misleading. Krebs also said this later on. "On the hack of the Trump campaign, I'm taking this seriously and have it on good authority. It's the real deal. You should too. I tend not to comment much these days for various reasons, personal and professional, but this is important. I have a bit of relevant insight and experience, and there's more coming, and we need to be prepared for down the road." You might not like the victim here, but the adversary gives 0 Fs who you like or don't like. They have their own objectives, and guess what? You're the target. Take this seriously. But also keep in mind that you're part of the playbook. They want you to either amplify it or doubt it. Take a beat, touch grass, as the kids say, and just vote. American voters decide American elections. Keep it that way. Now, if this is just a disinformation operation designed to wake everybody up, well then, cheers to Chris Krebs for executing it so well. Otherwise, that is a man who oversaw the usurpation of the United States of America and told the country not to worry because we have the safest and most secure election of all time. And again, maybe we'll find out there's some rational explanation for what Chris Krebs could mean by that in some honest fashion. Maybe he was tasked with making sure this sting operation from the cybersecurity level went swimmingly. And maybe he can claim that the problem was somewhere else in the system. But otherwise, the guy is a key figure in the steal. These are very strange responses. And it is also strange timing for Chris Krebs to get back in the game over reports from Microsoft that Iran is trying to interfere in the election. Krebs was a member of a press conference with DNI John Ratcliffe and FBI Director Christopher Wray before the 2020 election, announcing Iran interfering in the election that year as well. And so let's recap quickly. We have the Venezuelan election of 2 weeks ago. Nicolas Maduro, the so-called socialist dictator who is now called a communist dictator, won and very likely won big. the opposition claimed victory, as they have done in Venezuela before, when the opposition did not come anywhere close to victory. And we will talk about Venezuela again in a few minutes. But all sorts of templates have been laid down by Maduro in Venezuela. He also went head to head with Elon Musk. We'll talk about Elon in a couple of minutes. Elon came out in support of the opposition candidate. He announced that Maduro had stolen his election. Maduro called him the archenemy. Elon Musk called him a donkey in return, threatened him with space lasers, changed the color of his Twitter verification badge from blue to silver. They agreed to a fist fight. Elon said if Elon was the winner, Maduro had to resign. If Maduro was the winner, Elon would fly him to Mars for free. And then Maduro announced that access to Twitter in Venezuela would be suspended for 10 days. It would be 10 days of darkness for Twitter in Venezuela. And in the midst of all that, we get the Georgia Board of Elections, the Smartmatic indictment, and this Iranian hack of the Trump campaign. And so on top of that stack of issues, on Saturday afternoon, Donald Trump posts on Truth Social a 2023 post on X, formerly Twitter, by one J Alex Halderman, who is the country's foremost expert on voting machines. In his post, he wrote, "Today, the Federal District Court for the Northern District of Georgia unsealed a 96-page report that I wrote with Professor Aspring from Auburn University. It describes serious vulnerabilities we found in Georgia's Dominion ImageCast X ballot marking devices." So on Saturday, Trump posts a screenshot of that tweet with a link to the report by J Alex Halderman. Now, I went through this report at length in a podcast episode last year on June 15th called The Halderman Report. Just write Halderman Report into the search feature on the Substack. You will find that episode right away. But here are some highlights, some quotes from the Halderman Report, which is evidence in the Curling versus Raffensperger case in Georgia that's been active since before the 2020 election. Halderman writes in the report, "There is no realistic mechanism to fully secure vote casting and tabulation computer systems from cyber threats. That's as clear as it can possibly be. Attackers can alter the QR codes on printed ballots to modify voters' selections." We just discussed that. The software update that Georgia installed in October 2020 left Georgia's BMDs in a state where anyone can install malware with only brief physical access to the machines. I show that this problem can potentially be exploited in the polling place, even by non-technical voters. He goes on, "Without needing any secret information, I created a counterfeit technician card that can unlock any ImageCast X machine in Georgia. As I often say, very safe, very secure. I agree with Chris Krebs. What could be more secure than this system? Despite the addition of a paper trail, ICX malware, that's the ImageCast X malware, can still change individual votes and most election outcomes without detection. Election results are determined from ballot QR codes. Although outcome-changing fraud conducted in this manner could be detected by a risk-limiting audit, Georgia requires a risk-limiting audit of only one contest every 2 years. Again, the country's foremost expert on voting machines is saying all of these things. They are part of his report entered into the Curling v. Raffensperger case in Georgia that has been going on for years. And just one more quote here. "This means that in a close contest, ICX malware could manipulate enough ballots to change the election outcome with low probability of detection." So again, all of those templates for the disclosure and exposure of not only election rigging and theft in our country, but the fact that the system itself is thoroughly incapable of producing a legitimate result. That is the piece of knowledge that must get into the head of every single American. And people need to wrestle with that and understand what it means. It means it is not possible to create a legitimate election with this election system. It's not a matter of proving fraud. It's not a matter of proving cheating or manipulation or anything else. The system itself is thoroughly incapable of producing a legitimate result. There is no way to move forward without that understanding. So Trump is now bringing the Halderman report into the public conversation, or at least he's trying to. Hopefully he'll talk about it tonight. That would be great, because it is necessary for the country to understand this. And I imagine we are probably getting pretty close to a decision in that Curling v. Raffensperger case. And it's quite possible that that will upend the election system in Georgia and elsewhere. And it will prove immediately that the 2020 election and every election since has been illegitimate. And I think people really need to spend some time thinking about what it would mean to be told that we have won an election under these terms. Is that going to be acceptable to people? Is everybody just going to take the win and say, I guess that makes our elections fair? Are we really that weak and that desperate? I don't think we are. I think that would be a disgrace, to be perfectly honest. I think that we should plan on having everything reviewed going in. If the election is not transparent, if it's not verifiable, there's no way it can be legitimate no matter which winner is announced. All we would be saying is, I guess our overlords let us believe we won this one. And what would be the response from the other side? Would they view the election as legitimate? No, of course not. And sure, they might be seen as hypocrites, but they're already seen as hypocrites. They don't care. Their morality is relative. They care about the consequences. They have already been hypocrites on this issue. They said Trump stole it in 2016 and that he was legitimate. And then they put out movies about how the machines could not produce a legitimate election, and then went and completely reversed themselves when the TV told them that they won. They don't care about that. The election has to be reviewed in full, no matter what. That has to happen. And everyone should want it to happen. That's the one way that we could actually convince the country that we have a legitimate president and a legitimate government. People are worried about what's happening to the kids in schools while ignoring the fact that school board elections get stolen. There's a National Association of School Boards, a centralized and centralizing governing body that implements the regime's agenda throughout our public school system across the country. You think they're just leaving all that to chance? Like hopefully the people will choose the school board members that allow us to implement the agenda? No. You think the machines work better when you're voting for your city council or your sheriff or your judges that might decide your fate if you happen to run afoul of all the illegitimate rules and laws put in place by these illegitimate representatives? They have the ability to decide the winners and losers. Why wouldn't they use that ability? Trump is highlighting the Halderman report for a reason. He wants people to know this is the actual state of play in our elections. This is how our election systems function. And if you're one of those people who is committed to voting, thinks that is our path out of this, thinks Trump says we should vote, so we should vote, thinks that we need to get the vote down on the record so that if they adjudicate the election at some point, they will have that proper answer and everyone's vote properly counted. I don't agree with those points of view, but I understand them, and I understand that people see that as a degree of caution. They want to participate in the process as like a hedge, a backup plan. And I don't agree, but I get it. And people should make whatever decision is right for them. But you can absolutely go do that and convince other people to do that while not ignoring the fact that our election system as it stands now is incapable of producing a legitimate result. And you can also advocate for the view that no matter what happens on November 5th, you believe there should be full, transparent, forensic audits of absolutely everything that happens. So the entire process is transparent and the votes and the results are verifiable by anyone who wants to look. We can be honest about the system. We can be advocates for transparency and verifiability and full audits to make sure that everything works perfectly without having to trust the television and the corrupted court system. And you can still go vote and convince other people to do the same. Because let's say you don't do that. And let's say all you do is focus on voting on November 5th. Donald Trump's told you to vote, so you're going to vote. Donald Trump will give you some endorsements of other candidates, and you will vote for those people too. And then because there are other elections on that ballot, there are going to be other people with little R's next to their name, and then you'll vote for them and install a bunch of uniparty candidates into the government who do the work of your enemy. But let's say we're all very specific about our choices. We're going to vote for Donald Trump. We're going to vote for Trump-endorsed candidates, and we're going to vote for other people who we have thoroughly vetted and researched for ourselves to know that their interests align with ours and that they are going to go into government to faithfully represent our interests in a forceful way because their interests and our interests are aligned. And let's say that Donald Trump wins and we have uniparty candidates winning up and down the ballot. Or let's say the TV tells us that Trump has lost and we have uniparty candidates up and down the ballot. And everyone has spent months focusing all of the energy on the election and convincing people that it's very close and that the system can produce a legitimate result. Are you going to call for transparency and verifiability after the fact? And on what basis would you do that after you've spent months attesting to the fact that the system can produce legitimacy? Would you take the TV announcing a Trump win and just move on and not bother asking for transparency or verifiability? Will people push for Trump to do something about the elections once he has been declared the winner of a fake election? And where will the support for that come from when we are immediately launched into a period of total narrative chaos as the regime does everything it can in order to destabilize the country and make it so that Trump can be subverted in his next term as he was in the first? What if, and this is not even a hypothetical, so maybe it's better stated as, what happens when Trump is actively tearing down the federal bureaucracy, the administrative state, the deep state, and all of the rules that they have used for so long to regulate and control people's lives and people's businesses? What happens when that's all gone and all of those issues are now going to have to be decided at a state level in your state? Will Donald Trump, as president for 4 years, give you confidence that what's happening in your state is happening at the behest of the people through their elected representatives? Will Trump's victory prove that your state and local representatives are legitimate, selected through legitimate elections that are transparent and verifiable? Donald Trump said he is transferring power back to you, the people. I don't imagine that he did that so that you, the people, could transfer power back to them, the uniparty, saying, I know you don't run free and fair elections, but here's my vote, here's my consent. Can't you please just do it this time? And I know you can't. So can you please at least just tell me that Trump's president again? Would that have made all of this worth it? No, it would not. We do not have to ask the government for legitimate elections. If you are doing that, you are already a subject. We also know what their answer is because we've watched them give the answer over and over again for the last 4 years. The answer is stop asking about elections or we will censor you and attempt to put you in prison. They wouldn't have to do that if they could win elections without cheating, and they're not going to relinquish control of the system as some kind of favor. It's their system. They own it. So we talked about Venezuela. We talked about the Iran hack. We talked about Maduro versus Musk. We talked about Smartmatic. And we talked about Donald Trump highlighting J Alex Halderman. All of these storylines just weaving back and forth. And now the Donald Trump and Elon Musk storyline is going to converge. Trump announced a few days ago that he was going to be doing an interview with Elon Musk on X, formerly Twitter, tonight. Trump is going to join Elon in a Twitter Spaces session. I hope, though I think I may be disappointed, that it will be just Elon Musk and Donald Trump talking back and forth, and Elon can pull in questions from the Twitter audience. He has already solicited questions for the interview tonight. But the last thing I want to see is Ian Miles Chong and Mario Nawfal and Jason Calcanis and 8 DeSantis simps trying to make themselves the center of attention while asking Trump a question. Now, this event is like the Super Bowl of politics. Every major thing Donald Trump does at this point is like the Super Bowl of politics. The Joe Biden debate was massive, and this might be even bigger. At least the numbers will certainly suggest that. And so in the run-up to that, in order to get more eyes on the exchange tonight, Donald Trump has, quote-unquote, come back to Twitter. His campaign released a video at 3 a.m. Eastern, and he sent out a number of tweets since then. It started out with this post: "They want to silence me because I will never let them silence you. They're not coming after me, they're coming after you. I just happen to be standing in their way, and I'm never moving. We will make America great again. Hashtag Trump on X." And he posted a video from DonaldJTrump.com looking to draw attention to the 20 core promises to make America great again. Here is the video.
Trump has left the building. Over.
We can now project the winner of the presidential race. Donald Trump wins the presidency.
What started off as unlikely, impossible, is now reality.
I will fight for you with every breath in my body, and I will never, ever let you down.
We have a president who actually fulfilled the promises he made during the campaign, securing the border to foreign policy.
He now has a record as president that's pretty damn impressive.
Breaking news out of Palm Beach,
The FBI has executed an unprecedented search warrant at President Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate.
The former president has both sides of the political aisle up
is
in
a
arms.
dangerous and unstable moment in American history.
The Justice Department has just indicted former President Donald Trump.
For 7 years, they hated him, they targeted him, they hunted him.
This is the epitome of the abuse of the prosecutorial power to preempt political decisions.
I never thought anything like this could happen in America. The only crime that I have committed is to fearlessly defend our nation from those who seek to destroy it. The more that a broken system tells you that you're wrong, the more certain you should be that you must keep pushing ahead. They want to take away my freedom because I will never let them take away your freedom. They want to silence me because I will never let them silence you. They're not coming after me, they're coming after you, and I just happen to be standing in their way, and I will never be moving. On November 5th, 2024, justice will be done. We will take back our country, and we will make America great again. America will always rise to every challenge and overcome every danger.
Donald Trump seems to always get stronger when challenged. These types of things, I think, give him strength.
When I'm reelected, I will totally obliterate the deep state. As long as we have pride in our beliefs, courage in our convictions, and faith in our God, then we will not fail.
Now, that is a very powerful campaign video. It's right on message, and I think that people will respond well to that, of course. The post links to Trump's 20 core promises. This is going to be good for easy reference tonight for people giving Trump a chance, maybe for the first time in years, maybe for the first time ever. President Trump's 20 core promises: 1, seal the border and stop the migrant invasion. 2, carry out the largest deportation operation in American history. 3, end inflation and make America affordable again. 4, make America the dominant energy producer in the world by far. And that's going to be intimately linked to Bitcoin. Number 5, stop outsourcing and turn the United States into a manufacturing superpower. That was a major part of the agenda in the first term, the re-onshoring of manufacturing. 6, large tax cuts for workers and no tax on tips. I think it'll go much further than that. I did an episode a couple of months back called Read My Lips, No Taxes. I think that's where we're headed. Number 7, defend our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, and our fundamental freedoms, including freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and the right to keep and bear arms. Number 8, prevent World War III, restore peace in Europe and in the Middle East, and build a great Iron Dome missile defense shield over our entire country, all made in America. The Iron Dome missile defense shield is narrative shielding against narrative weapons of mass destruction. And hopefully we will all be able to mature out of believing this nonsense in the near future. Number 9, end the weaponization of government against the American people. Number 10, stop the migrant crime epidemic, demolish the foreign drug cartels, crush gang violence, and lock up violent offenders. Number 11, rebuild our cities, including Washington, D.C., making them safe, clean, and beautiful again. Well, that would require Washington, D.C. to be reacquired by the United States of America and not have it be this weird foreign-occupied city-state territory. Number 13, keep the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency. That is quite bold, but he wouldn't be saying it if he didn't intend to do it. And it's not just about intending to do it. The obvious implication would be that everything is already in place for that to be done. Number 14, fight to protect Social Security and Medicare with no cuts, including no changes to the retirement age. Number 15, cancel the electric vehicle mandate and cut costly and burdensome regulations. Number 16, cut federal funding for any school pushing critical race theory, radical gender ideology, and other inappropriate racial, sexual, or political content on our children. 17, keep men out of women's sports. 18, deport pro-Hamas radicals and make our college campuses safe and patriotic again. Number 19, secure our elections, including same-day voting, voter identification, paper ballots, and proof of citizenship. And everyone knows my feelings about that one. Number 20, unite our country by bringing it to new and record levels of success. And right below that is the donation portal. So a pretty standard campaign post, great video, great post, but a standard campaign post. That's not Trump being Trump. And you'll remember that late last summer, after Donald Trump had his mugshot taken, he posted on Twitter. He posted that mugshot. So today's not the first time he's posted since getting banned. It's just the first time he's posted in almost a year. He went on to advertise the big interview tonight with Elon Musk. He also tweeted this: "Are you better off now than you were when I was president? Our economy is shattered. Our border has been erased. We're a nation in decline. Make the American dream affordable again. Make America safe again. Make America great again." He posted this video, writing, "Meet San Francisco radical Kamala Harris."
I am Kamala Harris. My pronouns are she and her.
You're considered the most liberal United States senator. Well, actually, the nonpartisan GovTrack has rated you as the most liberal senator.
Do you have any plans to visit the border?
We are going to the border. We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe. I am in favor of saying that we're not going to treat people who are undocumented and cross the border as criminals. That's correct. That is correct.
A lot of the signs at the rally you just held were people standing there saying, abolish ICE.
Yeah.
Is that a position that you agree with?
We need to probably think about starting from scratch.
So you support giving universal health care, Medicare for all to people who are in this country illegally?
I am opposed to any policy that would deny in our country any human being public health, period.
Are you for defunding the police?
How are you defining defund the police? It's actually wrong and backward to think that more police officers will create more safety. We need to get rid of money bail.
Convicted, in prison, like the Boston Marathon bomber, on death row, people who are convicted of sexual assault, they should be able to vote?
I think we should have that conversation. I am prepared to get rid of the filibuster to pass a Green New Deal. I have always supported Medicare for all. I was very happy to sign on to Bernie's bill, and I give Bernie, frankly, a lot of credit. There's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking.
Do you ban plastic straws?
I think we should.
So Trump's been firing away while all eyes are on X, formerly Twitter, and the Trump account leading up to this big interview on Twitter Spaces tonight. And we will see if he sticks around and keeps posting tomorrow and on into the future, or if he just disappears from Twitter again. We've talked for a couple of years about the eventual decentralization of social media so that there can be no ultimate banning or censorship. Everything would just appear in whatever hub an individual user preferred, whether it's Twitter or some other platform, maybe on the Nostr protocol, as we've discussed before. Maybe there's a play in the future between Twitter and Truth Social, because we already have one going on between Truth Social and Rumble and Twitter and Rumble. The platforms ultimately may not be competitors in any traditional sense. So there could be something going on with that. I don't expect we're going to hear that kind of announcement, but I have a hard time Donald Trump is going to refocus all the energy on X, formerly Twitter, at this point. I really don't know why Donald Trump would want to do that when he doesn't need to do that. Everything he says on Truth Social is reposted on Twitter. It seems to me like it would be a bad idea to refocus everyone's energy on a platform that has caused so many problems in the past. And regardless of whether or not it's a little better, I'm not sure it is. It's still a heavily censored, heavily manipulated platform. Refocusing all of the energies on X creates totally unnecessary vulnerabilities that don't seem to provide much benefit, if any. The people on X think that that is the most important thing in the world, the most important social media platform that has ever existed, and their voices dominate that conversation. They want Donald Trump to be part of their conversation. They're not worried about Donald Trump being able to reach more voters. Trump is doing just fine. He does not need to be on that platform in order to win some fake votes in a fake election against Kamala Harris for now. But that's just my point of view. There are people operating information war at a level higher than I can probably understand right now. And I trust that Donald Trump will make the right decision whichever way he goes. Now, Karma Patriot had her eye on Trump's Twitter feed earlier today and caught a weird anomaly where his new tweets, I guess, vanished and some of the old tweets popped up at the top of his feed, particularly the ones from January 6th, 2021. And I'll just go through a few of these. She has a video online. You can find it in the information stream on Telegram, t.me/veryreasonable. Or obviously you can find Karma Patriot on Twitter or Truth Social. But what a series of tweets to highlight again for people who might not have thought about these things in the last 3.5+ years. So here were the top 4. If Vice President Mike Pence comes through for us, we will win the presidency. Many states want to decertify the mistake they made in certifying incorrect and even fraudulent numbers in a process not approved by their state legislatures, which it must be. Mike can send it back. And regardless of your feelings of Mike Pence, or whether Mike Pence simply did something that he was asked to do, something required of him, and was willing to put his personal reputation on the line, knowing that he would be seen as some kind of traitor, an unpatriotic American, if he went ahead and did it, and he did it anyway, he sacrificed his reputation for the country, even if you believe that. And you might be right. Think about what Trump is saying here. He's saying in no uncertain terms that the states wanted to decertify their fraudulently certified elections. Did Trump, as president on January 6, 2021, know that to be true beyond a shadow of a doubt? I genuinely don't know how anyone makes an argument otherwise. It is just on the basis that Donald Trump must be lying or must not have access to the information. And of course he has access to the information. So the only claim you could possibly make is that Donald Trump, as president of the United States on January 6, 2021, was lying about an issue of grave national importance like that. Now, there are absolutely people who believe that he was lying. And there have certainly been presidents who have lied extensively about things they know. But is Donald Trump lying? He's still saying now what he said then. The evidence is certainly there to support his claims. He could have backed down at any point and given himself a much easier time in life. So if he was lying, he's awfully committed to that lie. But of course, he wasn't lying. And what does it mean that he wasn't lying? And why has no one taken into account the fact that he wasn't lying? Should we assume nothing was done about this? Should we assume that nothing is still being done about this? Consider all the hundreds of thousands of man hours that have gone in to media hoaxes, fake elections, and all the rest of it over the last 4 years while people have ignored the most important things. It really is baffling. But let's continue. Trump goes on. Sleepy Eyes Chuck Todd is so happy with the fake voter tabulation process that he can't even get the words out straight. Sad to watch. And he's, of course, talking about Chuck Todd's coverage of the certification process that day. The next post in that string, states want to correct their votes, which they now know were based on irregularities and fraud, plus corrupt process never received legislative approval. All Mike Pence has to do is send them back to the states and we win. Do it, Mike. This is a time for extreme courage. And the last one that appeared at the very top of his feed today, the Republican Party and, more importantly, our country needs the presidency more than ever before. The power of the veto. Stay strong. Now, as you might imagine, people aren't too happy that Donald Trump is back on Twitter, and they're even less happy that Elon Musk is going to share his massive platform with Donald Trump, who has his own massive platform. Here's a bit from CNN this morning.
Out of this conversation that we're going to see tonight on Twitter?
Well, for one, I think it's going to be a very lighthearted conversation. Because Elon Musk has come out and endorsed Donald Trump, I expect this to be like a bromance type of an interview where they're supporting each other. I think that Elon Musk will let Donald Trump speak all of the falsehoods and misinformation that he wants. I mean, he's not a journalist. It's not his job necessarily. Does he want to be fact-checking all of the information? So I think it's just a platform for Donald Trump to come out and say whatever he wants. But the thing to remember, Cassie, is like the interview audience here is what Donald Trump needs. You see JD Vance going on Face the Nation, right? Sunday shows, traditional media, because he needs to get his name out there. Mm-hmm. Donald Trump's going the opposite route, right? He's talking to streamers and podcasters. He's going on X. He wants to rally up that sort of fringe online base. That's what Donald Trump is doing here tonight.
Well, he's meanwhile threatening to sue establishment media like the New York Times, etc. Sarah Fisher for us this morning. Sarah, thank you. I appreciate your time.
You got to love the inversion there. JD Vance is going on the Sunday shows to get his face out there. No one watches those shows. Donald Trump and Elon Musk are going to have tens of millions of views, if not hundreds of millions. This isn't a fringe online community. It's a huge chunk of the internet. And the clips are going to be reposted everywhere. Think about how strange it is that they just continue to use this language and this framing in an attempt to marginalize what are, at this point, obviously majority viewpoints. Trump said in his press conference last week that he believes his base represents 75% of the nation, and he has access to data to be able to tell him that for certain. He's not relying on these fake news polls the way idiots on X, formerly Twitter, and mainstream media are. The same way that Xi and Putin don't just believe Joe Biden received 81 million real lawful American votes and is a legitimate president. But even if it's too difficult to wrap your head around that Donald Trump has 75% of America supporting him, it's certainly a vast majority that wants to hear from him and that doesn't want him deplatformed. And that's true of the citizens of other countries as well. But apparently it is not true of the global governing bodies. This is from Thierry Breton, who is a European commissioner in the European Union, a letter dated today and addressed to Elon Musk. Dear Mr. Musk, I am writing you in the context of recent events in the United Kingdom and in relation to the planned broadcast on your platform X of a live conversation between a U.S. presidential candidate and yourself, which will also be accessible to users in the EU. I understand that you are currently doing a stress test of the platform. In this context, I am compelled to remind you of the due diligence obligations set out in the Digital Services Act as outlined in my previous letter. As the individual entity ultimately controlling a platform with over 300 million users worldwide, of which 1/3 in the EU, that has been designated as a very large online platform, in capitals, very large online platform. That's like something I would name it. I'm just going to start calling X, formerly Twitter, the very large online platform. You have the legal obligation to ensure X's compliance with EU law and in particular the DSA in the EU. And that is so funny because no, he doesn't. He could violate those laws and nothing would happen. If they took down Twitter, they would very likely have hell to pay. This notably means ensuring on one hand that freedom of expression and of information, including media freedom and pluralism, are effectively protected, and on the other hand, that all proportionate and effective mitigation measures are put in place regarding the amplification of harmful content in connection with relevant events, including live streaming, which, if unaddressed, might increase the risk profile of X and generate detrimental effects on civic discourse and public security. This is important against the background of recent examples of public unrest brought about by the amplification of content that promotes hatred, disorder, incitement to violence, or certain instances of disinformation. And so they are using their BLM, Antifa, immigrant-style riots and street violence in the UK to justify censorship in the US. How insane is that? It also implies, one, informing EU judicial and administrative authorities without undue delay on measures taken to address their orders against content considered illegal, according to national and/or EU law. Two, taking timely, diligent, non-arbitrary, and objective action upon receipt of notices by users considering certain content illegal. 3, informing users concerning the measures taken upon receipt of the relevant notice. And 4, publicly reporting about content moderation measures. In this respect, I note that the DSA obligations apply without exceptions or discrimination to the moderation of the whole user community and content of X, including yourself as a user with over 190 million followers, which is accessible to EU users and should be fulfilled in line with the risk-based approach of the DSA, which requires greater due diligence in case of a foreseeable increase of the risk profile. This stuff is insane. I mean, this is just straight up communist bureaucracy being implemented by some European communist attempting to censor a conversation happening in America because the people of the European Union might be exposed to that conversation. Breton goes on. As you know, formal proceedings are already ongoing against X under the DSA, notably in areas linked to the dissemination of illegal content and effectiveness of the measures taken to combat disinformation. As the relevant content is accessible to EU users and being amplified also in our jurisdiction, we cannot exclude potential spillovers in the EU. Therefore, we are monitoring the potential risks in the EU associated with the dissemination of content that may incite violence, hate, and racism in conjunction with major political or societal events around the world, including debates and interviews in the context of elections. So EU citizens are not allowed to see Donald Trump be interviewed on X, a platform that the EU thinks it has control over, on the basis that things Donald Trump might say might incite hatred and racism, or maybe even violence, in some political context. He writes, "Let me clarify that any negative effect of illegal content on X in the EU, which could be attributed to the ineffectiveness of the way in which X applies the relevant provisions of the DSA, may be relevant in the context of the ongoing proceedings and of the overall assessment of X's compliance with EU law. This is in line with what has already been done in the recent past, for example, in relation to the repercussions and amplification of terrorist content or content that incites violence, hate, and racism in the EU, such as in the context of the recent riots in the United Kingdom. I therefore urge you to promptly ensure the effectiveness of your systems and to report measures taken to my team. My services and I will be extremely vigilant to any evidence that points to breaches of the DSA and will not hesitate to make full use of our toolbox, including by adopting interim measures should it be warranted to protect EU citizens from serious harm. So he's not making any bones about it. He is 100% willing to attempt to punish Elon Musk and X, formerly Twitter, and all of the citizens of the EU for some sort of abstract harm that might occur from Elon Musk interviewing President Trump. He doesn't want the people of the European Union to get any of the wrong ideas. And by wrong ideas, and of course by wrong ideas, they mean any ideas that would encourage people to oppose their agenda. It's amazing, isn't it, how they will publicly come out and in various ways, through shame, through legal threats, whatever else, they will encourage people to censor themselves. And if the people won't censor themselves, then they encourage the platforms to censor the people. And by then, they're usually successful, or at least they were successful in the past. But at no time will they ever admit to having done the censorship. They force people to self-censor. They force platforms to censor and force those platforms into compliance. And then after the fact, they will claim that the people just censored themselves and the platforms complied because it was the right thing to do, because everybody agrees with their policies. They are coercing compliance. They are demanding agreement under threat. They are screaming their illegitimacy and their fear, for that matter, from the rooftops. So we will see how this goes this evening. I expect it's going to be a massive hit, assuming it goes off without a hitch. You'll remember Ron DeSantis attempted to launch his quote-unquote campaign over on X, formerly Twitter, and that did not go well at all. They had numerous technical issues, and then they had an absolutely horrific lineup of grifters and sycophants like Steve Deace on to ask Ron DeSantis questions. It was tremendously boring. Hopefully we do not have those technical problems tonight, but anything is possible. It's already been a strange day on Twitter for Donald Trump, with the weirdness of his newer tweets just disappearing and those January 6th tweets appearing at the top of his feed. And of course, there are all kinds of potential distractions that might pop up in the next few hours before that event gets started. Again, we heard threats throughout the weekend, an issue at Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, and we've had Colonel Douglas Macgregor continuing to post throughout the last few days and today about how World War III is imminent. And he has become a bit of a wild card, but he said earlier today on X, formerly Twitter, USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group steaming towards the Middle East for imminent attack. Submarine loaded with 150 cruise missiles now en route. New intelligence reveals Iran and Hezbollah poised to attack at any moment. Israeli military placed on high alert for imminent attack. God help us. So we shall see if anything materializes there. But these constant threats about World War III don't really have the pull they used to. People are tuning out a bit because there's been so much hype, so little reality, and at this point, virtually no desire to even consider U.S. involvement in any war anywhere. But a story about a major escalation, I suppose I could see that. Anything to distract from however Donald Trump decides to dominate the public narrative tonight. Now, I wanted to talk about Venezuela and this incredible report we went through some of on Saturday night's Devolution Power Hour from a globalist think tank called International Crisis Group. I'll try to get to that later in the week, but just think about the templates we have here. All of these stories coming back around. Storylines that have been dormant now for 3.5, 4 years. Fraudulent elections, destabilizing color revolutions and protest movements, false reporting of vote counts and exit polling, Smartmatic and comms blackouts, the Halderman report, and Donald Trump on Twitter. All of it's coming back around. And you got to say welcome back to all of it. It's so nice to see it finally return. I'll be back tomorrow at the same reasonable time on the same reasonable podcast network. I don't have a network. Masks and lockdowns don't work. They lied to you about a pandemic. And Joe Biden will never be president.
In my mind, that's the end game.
If you're listening to this episode for free, you can support me and support the show and the work I do by signing up for a paid subscription at imyourmoderator.substack.com. You can do so for as low as $50 a year or $5 a month. Comes out to under $0.25 per episode, and you'll blast right through the paywall for all of the writing. The merch store is www.cancelcouture.com, and you can find everything else by heading to Linktree. Linktree.com/I'mYourModerator. And I'll see you soon out on the range. It's